Well, the fate of those 8 individuals that have been held at the Djibouti Airforce Base on U.S. soil, as ordered by Judge Murphy, has now reached a conclusion after making a trip through the United States Supreme Court not once but twice, through Judge Randy Moss's courtroom in Washington and back, almost a round tripper, to Judge Murphy. We have their fate is now been decided, and they will be deported to the South Sudan. And Judge Murphy, however, was able to extract from the Trump administration Department of Justice lawyers, for what it's worth, representations that these people will not be detained there or incarcerated in South Sudan, but rather will be processed for immigration and be given temporary status. So at least we have that. But I need to cover this story for you. And the United States Supreme Court making not one but 2 rulings. Judge Moss making a ruling, Judge Murphy making a series of rulings that all got us to this moment. You're here on Legal AF on the YouTube channel. I'm traveling, but I am bringing you the hot takes that I think you've come to rely on. While you've got a minute, hit the free subscribe button. Let's talk about this case. It started with Judge Murphy. Judge Murphy deciding that before removal to third countries could be accomplished, there needed to be a modicum of notice and due process. And he blocked that original removal. The Trump administration took the case to the United States Supreme Court, and it should not come as a shock or surprise any longer when it comes to immigration and deportation, although it was a certain amount of shock to those that follow this closely. A 6-3 super MAGA majority of the Supreme Court about 10 days ago ruled that there didn't need to be much due process or notice at all for this type of third country removal, and in one paragraph ordered their removal. In other words, blocked the injunction by Judge Murphy, saying that the whole issue needed to be addressed at the First Circuit Court of Appeals. In other words, it had to come up maybe 6 months from now or a year from now, but they weren't going to stop the removal in the meantime. We had a major dissent from Justice Sotomayor, Ketanji Brown Jackson, who said that this was a lawless, law-free president and that the Supreme Court had abdicated its responsibility and abused its power by agreeing on an emergency basis to stay Judge Murphy's order. It returned to Judge Murphy with some instruction from Justice Sotomayor. In her dissent, she said not every order of Judge Murphy has been stayed by this case, only the temporary restraining order. He had a second order, because the TRO was from April, second order in May. In the second order, he was trying to get to the bottom of whether the Trump administration violated his order and deported over his orders and in contempt. So he had a secondary order, a remedial order that was still in play because he hadn't been divested of jurisdiction. Trump administration likes to violate federal court orders and then seek permission after the fact and forgiveness after the fact from the U.S. Supreme Court. That's been their strategy. So they ran back to the United States Supreme Court and asked on a motion for clarification just before the term closed to have it clarified that Judge Murphy needed to allow for the removal to these third countries of these 8 individuals, and that even his remedial order should be blocked. The Supreme Court did not rule during the end of the term, but then suddenly, about 48 hours ago or so, they issued a clarification. And in the clarification, they said that yes, all of Judge Murphy's orders, including his remedial order, because it was based on an order that was eventually ruled to be blocked, was going to be blocked as well. Once they blocked Judge Murphy's second order, then the next almost and final nail in the coffin, so to speak, for these 8 individuals was up and coming. But in the last 24 hours, the lawyers went to Judge Randy Moss in Washington, D.C., making new arguments. Randy Moss stayed their removal for an additional day, transferred the case back and referred the case back to Judge Murphy in Massachusetts. So now we go Supreme Court, not once, but twice. Judge Moss from DC laterals it to Judge Murphy in Massachusetts, who takes a look at the Supreme Court order on motion of clarification, decides he does not have jurisdiction any longer over these people to block their removal. Here's what happens in his courtroom. In the hearing that he held late on Friday night, he said, ironically, 4th of July, he says, "I think it seems to me almost self-evident," this is Judge Murphy, "that the United States government cannot take human beings and send them to circumstances in which their physical well-being is at risk, simply either to punish them or to send a signal to others that you can come into the country and commit a crime. Not only are you going to be prosecuted, but you're going to be sent to some horrible situation." The lawyers in the courtroom for the Department of Justice claimed during Friday's hearing that they had spoken to the State Department. I mean, you can't really believe the Trump administration and the Department of Justice, but we're in a courtroom. People are not under oath, but they're officers of the court. And here's what they had to say about that. They said they told the judge that they had gotten assurances from the State Department under Marco Rubio that they had that South Sudan, once the deportation was completed, that the men would be granted immigration status in accordance with South Sudan's national laws and immigration proceedings, and they would allow them to remain in the country temporarily. But that's about all they had. They didn't believe they should be detained. This was the quote from the DOJ lawyer. "We certainly haven't asked for them to be detained, and our understanding is that there's no reason to think that they will be, but that last part is obviously speculation." This is what the Department of Justice says officially on the record. At the same time, outside the courtroom for political purposes, the spokespeople for the Trump administration call the 8 people sickos that are now, thank God, out of the country. That's not what the Department of Justice is telling the judges in the courtroom. My question for the lawyers that are handling this case, which are doing an amazing, amazing job at fighting off a lawless president, is make sure you're focusing on the extrajudicial comments made by the Trump administration and its spokespeople to be able to bring that back in a courtroom. I would have brought a split screen into the courtroom and said, "Okay, Judge, they're telling you that there's no harm is going to befall these men." At the same time, the spokesperson for Donald Trump says these are sickos that thank God they're out of the country. So you can't believe a word they say. We got to continue to bring this information, not just on YouTube, but into the courtroom and in the courthouse, and continue to make these arguments. I'll continue to follow it, call out things that I see with my experience as a trial lawyer, to make sure this administration's feet is being held to the fire right here on Legal AF. We are this close, a whisper, a cat's whisker away from 700,000 subscribers in just 8 months. I think we're at 699,000. Help us roll the odometer. Hit the subscribe button now. It is for free. We are not behind a paywall. We've got Legal AF, the Substack, where you can read many of the decisions and orders and opinions and dissents that we talk about, along with commentary on our Legal AF Substack, also for free. And of course, Legal AF, the podcast, just got ranked in the top 22 in the United States of all podcasts on YouTube, all, regardless of genre. So in the meantime, I'm Michael Popak, and I am reporting. I'm Michael Popak, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popak Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popak Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.